right. So we will go ahead and get started. My name is Melissa Leffin. I am the Director of Career Engagement here at the Wisconsin School of Business. And I have worked with a lot of students on this exact topic, which is how do you make this super important decision about your offer and how do you negotiate that offer? So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about a few different things. And I apologize, my pup is whining and he wants to participate in this event as well. But we're going to talk about what you should consider when you're evaluating an offer, how you know if an offer is competitive, how you can negotiate different components of an offer, and then finally, and I think most importantly, what resources are available to you as you're making these important decisions. And I know I saw in the survey that one of the big things people wanted to know about is how do you even know if like a complete benefits package is competitive? So that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. As I mentioned, feel free to use the chat if you have questions. Also, feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question as well. So diving right in, you received an offer. So now what do you do? One of the most important things to remember is you should not accept an offer on the spot. So a lot of times when you're extended an offer, a recruiter or an employer will call you and share the good news that they're going to be extending you an offer. The reason it's really important to not accept this on the spot is you want to be able to take the time to really think about this. Is this the job you want? How competitive is this offer? Do you want to negotiate? So the best thing to do is really say thank you, show your enthusiasm, and then ask about next steps and when they're going to accept a decision from you. So once you get off the phone, then what you're going to do is do your research and gather all of the facts. A really important thing that I cannot emphasize enough is to make sure that you are reviewing your written offer in detail. There's a lot of stuff in these written offers, and a lot of it might be in jargon that you're not used to. So highly recommend either sitting down with a mentor, with your career coach to really review the full offer and make sure that you understand everything. Also, it's really helpful to ask to speak with people at the company to learn more about the role, learn more about what you're getting into. So really make sure that you're gathering all the information possible. And then finally, you want to determine if you can make a decision by the deadline that they give you. So a lot of times companies will give you a couple of weeks to make a decision on an offer. Usually we see about 2 weeks is what companies are asking for. For some people, that's plenty of time. You're absolutely able to make a decision in that amount of time. For others, you may be in the process with other firms that you want to make sure that you're able to go through and see that process through. So what you want to do is think about where you are in the process with these other companies that you're interested in, and if you would likely accept an offer from them over the offer you currently have in hand. So if you're in a scenario where you've got your dream company that you haven't received an offer from yet, and you think it's going to be a couple more weeks, but you have another offer in hand, try to understand how much time you're going to need to get through the process with that company and work with your career coach to think about the best way to ask for a deadline extension. A lot of times companies are receptive to this. It happens all the time. And so we can really help you think about the right language to do that. I'll pause there. Any questions on anything that we've covered so far? Great. So then you've kind of decided about your decision timeline. What do you do next? You really want to discuss your decision with your trusted network and trust your gut. I've said this a couple times, use your career coach, talk to mentors, talk to family, friends, people who know you to really talk through this decision. So what are you thinking about when you're making a decision? A lot of people see offers and they think the big thing that they need to consider is the salary, but there's actually a lot more to an offer that you'll want to evaluate in addition to that. First thing you want to think about is the role. Is this something that you really want to do? What's the job function? What are you going to be doing in this role? What opportunities do you have for advancement? Where is this going to lead within the organization and outside of the organization? And then finally, what kind of support are you going to have? Will you have access to your supervisor? Will you have access to management, leadership, mentors, etc.? Really thinking about this full picture. This is going to be something that you're either doing for a few months over a really important summer during college, if you're doing an internship, or it's going to be the first place that you're launching your career. So you really want to make sure that this is something that you are excited about and is going to put you on the right path to achieve your career goals. You also want to think about the company. How's the culture? How are their values? Is it a company you want to work for? Does the mission align with your personal values? Thinking about the people. I know a lot of times an interview process feels like the company is just evaluating you, but it's really an opportunity for you to evaluate the company as well. Are these people that you can see yourself going to work with every day and spending so much time with? That's a really important consideration. Also good to think about the location. Is this somewhere that you want to live? Is there any flexibility in that? So really keeping those components in mind. Then you want to think about compensation. And when I say compensation, I'm talking about the full package that they offer you. So again, this is getting to the like thinking beyond salary piece. Pay is important, obviously, but there's a few different things that come into play when we're talking about your pay. So there's your salary, which is going to be that large number that they're offering you if it's for a full-time job. For internships, this can look a little more like an hourly rate or a weekly rate. But essentially, like, what is that base pay that you're going to be getting? That's definitely an important number, but it's important to understand how compensation as a whole works at that company. Also think about what bonuses are offered. Sometimes companies will offer relocation bonuses, signing bonuses. It's good to ask about, do they do performance bonuses each year? Because what that can help you determine is how much of that base pay salary number is your total compensation going to be made up of. Also important to understand opportunities for growth in both. So asking questions like, how often is performance and compensation evaluated? That can help you understand, all right, this is the number I'm going in with to start. How long will I be at that number and when will I have the opportunity for that to grow? Also important to think about benefits, which is definitely one of the more foreign concepts, I think, for a lot of students, particularly coming out of college. Because now all of a sudden you're thinking about healthcare. You're thinking about retirement at 22 years old, which sounds crazy, but it's actually a pretty important benefit to think about. Some companies will have stock options, profit sharing, pre-tax dollar benefits. So there's going to be a lot of information that they're going to throw at you in this benefits package. And it's really important to think about these different things, how important these are to you, and use that to help you make your decision. This is an area where I definitely recommend seeing if someone within the HR group after you get an offer can walk you through this in detail so that you can make sure you understand what it means specifically for that company. Last piece of compensation that you'll see in almost every offer is leave. I'm guessing a lot of you are going to want to take some time off of work when you're working. So thinking about what does vacation time look like, sick leave, holidays, family leave, all of that. What is that going to look like for you? And making sure that you're thinking about how that fits into your total compensation. So the reason I say that is you may have a company that offers a slightly lower salary, but gives you more paid time off. So when companies are thinking about these numbers, they're looking at this total package and how that all plays together. So it's really important to keep that in mind, and also thinking about work-life balance with this component as well. Oftentimes, if the salary is really, really high, there's a reason it's really, really high. So that might mean less ability to have time away from work. And it's really about prioritizing and weighing what's more important to you. I'll pause there. Any questions or comments? All right. So making a decision, we have a tool that I will send out to everybody after this event that can really help you think about how to prioritize all of these different components. So this is what we call a decision-making matrix. Definitely recommend writing down as much as possible when you are thinking about offers. It just helps to get things out of your brain and on paper so that you can make a really clear decision. So as you're thinking about all of these different components, just like we went over, the salary, the job function, the values of the organization, thinking about what is your ideal state for each of these. And if you have multiple offers, essentially ranking the companies on how they match up with what your ideal state is. This can help you get a really good picture of where things are really aligned with your priorities and where things may not be. And I've found can help you organize your thoughts as you're thinking through these decisions. This is an exercise you can do on your own, or you can do it with a career coach, a friend, a mentor, whatever works best for you. But definitely can't emphasize enough, get things out of your head and on paper. It's going to make the process of making a decision much, much easier. So moving on, now we're going to talk about how you actually negotiate your offer once you get it. So a question we get a lot is, what can you actually negotiate when it comes to an offer? The big one and the most common thing that people negotiate is probably pay. We see a lot of people go after salary. They want to get that number up, which makes sense. And we definitely encourage students to negotiate offers because it's important to make sure that you're being compensated appropriately for the work you're going to do. You can also negotiate some bonuses, relocation expenses when it comes to pay. In terms of benefits, depending on the size of the company you're going to, these may or may not be negotiable. Most large companies have very standard vacation time schedules. Some smaller companies do have some variation. So it's always something you can ask the question about. Another thing to think about, and particularly coming out of the COVID era where everyone has been working from home, would be negotiating a possible flexible work schedule or some work from home benefits. I think this is going to become more and more common as work from home becomes part of the norm of the workforce. Other two big ones that I've seen negotiated would be your deadline for letting them know about the offer and the start date. So a lot of times companies will come to you with like a recommended start date. I've seen some students that want to either move that up or they want to push that out so that they can take some time over the summer to travel or do things before starting that full-time job. So as you're thinking about negotiating, these are the key things that you can negotiate. So where do you even start? It's really important to not negotiate until after you've received the offer. And I would say after you've received the written offer. I have sometimes seen students jump the gun and start asking questions about compensation, salary before the end of the interview process. And that does sometimes seem a bit presumptive to people. So really recommend get that offer, evaluate it, and then start your negotiation process. You also want to do this after you've done research on salary and benefit benchmarks. So spend a lot of time focusing on that. And I'm going to talk about that a bit more in a minute, but really make sure you've done your research and prioritize your list of negotiable items. So really think about, of the things that I want to negotiate, what would be acceptable to me and where would I walk away? So a lot of times when you're thinking about negotiation, you're going to come in with something as like, think of it as if you were buying a house. You come in with an offer, the person usually then has a counter offer that's somewhere in between the original. So as you're thinking about negotiation, you want to think about like, obviously, if they give me exactly what I asked for, great. But where is my sort of point where I'm willing to walk away from this if they can't meet me here? And thinking about that for all of the different items. And again, this is where I think writing it down is really, really important, because as you're making these decisions, it's very easy to get caught up in the moment and do some things reactively. So keeping things written down can keep you really grounded. Another important thing to remember is to negotiate multiple issues simultaneously, not serially. What you do not want to do is come to the person who gave you your offer and say, I'd like to talk about my salary. I was wondering if it would be possible to get closer to X number. Then they come back with a salary offer to you. And then you say, okay, great. I'd also like to talk about my start date, or I'd also like to talk about vacation time. You want it to be one conversation so that this person doesn't have to continue to go back and forth to get you what you need. So really think about, what are all of the things I'm going to be asking for? How does that look when I'm asking for it all together? And how do I want to communicate that to the person? This is also a good gut check, because if you feel like this is too much to ask for all at once, I feel like it's going to come across like I'm asking for too much, then you probably are asking for too much. And so you wouldn't want to do that serially anyway. Questions on that? Great. Okay, so doing your research, especially on salary. A lot of people want to ask for more money for the sake of asking for more money. And that's great. I think everyone should ask for more money because you want to make sure that you are being compensated fairly. But it's really important to be able to back up why you're asking for more. So really be clear on the rationale for why you deserve the number that you're asking for. We're going to talk a little bit more about how to make sure that you're doing that. But you want to come to them with examples of why you think you deserve that number, not just asking for the number outright. So to do that, really look at salary data for a few different things. You want to look at similar roles, similar companies, and similar skill sets. This is going to help you kind of gauge where you are competitively. The other thing is you want to look at that full compensation and benefits package. So as you're going out and doing your research, also looking at what do comparable companies offer in terms of vacation time, things like that, because that can come into play with that salary number. Also taking location into account. Cost of living is a really big driver of how companies make salary ranges for their employees. So if you are moving to San Francisco, for example, you're going to have a much higher cost of living than if you're moving to Milwaukee. Because of that, you will see some differences in that salary. So what I really recommend is looking at the cost of living and thinking about what percentage of my salary would be going to things like rent, like transportation. And am I reasonable in terms of like what they're paying me, where I'll be able to meet the needs of that cost of living? It's also important to look at taxes state by state. So really looking at what that income tax is going to be and keeping that in mind, because that can also have differences in terms of what that salary looks like. So we have a tool that I'll share at the end that can help you think about this, but the cost of living piece is definitely an important one to keep in mind. And then finally, you want to think about how your skills and experiences measure up to other candidates. What differentiates you and makes you deserve more compensation? This is a little bit more challenging when you're coming into entry-level roles right out of undergrad. But that being said, if you have a super relevant internship experience, or you've taken a coding course, or you're certified in something that this company is looking for, you can definitely ask for increases in compensation because you have some of those skills that you are confident your peers who applied for the role don't have. So to summarize, the things you want to really research, you want to look at comparable roles, comparable companies, location, and then really thinking about the skills that you're bringing to the table and how those tie to the job. So those are the key components you're thinking about when you're negotiating a salary. So some best practices. One of the most important things to do is to show enthusiasm for the role. Likability is very important. If people like you, they are much more likely to try to make something happen for you. A company does not necessarily want to go and ask for more for someone if they don't even think you're that interested in the role. So that's where you really want to show, like, I am very interested in this. I am motivated to do this job. These are some of the things that I am interested in learning more about to see if they're flexible in terms of the offer. It's also really important to understand the other side of the table. So keeping in mind who you're negotiating with. Is it the right person? Is it the decision maker? What is motivating them? So if you are talking to the person who will be your supervisor or someone from the business, they're likely going to be a little bit more motivated and potentially have a little bit more flexibility to make movements on that offer compared to someone who's working within human resources or recruiting. Reason is the person in the business, they want you specifically in this role. You're the person they're going to be working with. So they are motivated to help get you to accept it. A lot of times recruiters, they're measured on filling the role. And so a lot of times they want someone in it, but if you don't take it, they're okay with someone else potentially being in this role. So just keeping that in mind as you're talking to people, it can help you position things in a better way to ultimately get to the outcome that you're looking for. Also, be respectful of constraints they have. Sometimes they'll tell you that up front. And knowing that if they say, like, this is our company policy on vacation, I don't have anywhere to go on that, don't continue to push on that. If they say that there's a constraint, trust that they're not out to get you and that there actually is a constraint there, and focus on some of the other things that might be a little bit more flexible. Definitely be prepared for tough questions. So you're going to want to use your research to back up what you're asking for and why. So having that evidence around what you're asking for. And also be prepared for them to ask you about where you are in the process with other companies. If they are able to get you more money, how likely are you to accept the offer? They may come to you and say, if I go back and get this and I come to you with it, will you accept? So being prepared to answer those types of questions. Also be really thoughtful about what you're asking for. So with salary, make sure you're asking for a reasonable increase. Starting at entry level, anything higher than 10 to 20% more than what they offered you is going to be difficult to justify. So just keep that in mind. So the reason I say that is a lot of times when people are promoted, those salary increases tend to be anywhere from like 5 to 15%. So if you're asking for 20% over what they offered you, you're essentially asking for 2 promotions right off the bat. So really, really keep that in mind. Now, if you've done your research and you're like confident that 20% above is competitive, you absolutely can ask for that. Just be ready to do that justification. The other thing is just negotiate over what matters to you and don't haggle over the little things. It's definitely not worth it to fight for things that aren't really a priority for you, because the other thing is that can take away from your ability to get movement on the things that are really important. Finally, you want to avoid ultimatums. So definitely don't make demands, but ask for questions. So an example of what this could sound like, if I'm making a demand, that would be me saying, I'm really disappointed in the salary for this offer. Unless you're able to get me 60,000 instead of 50,000, I don't think I'll be able to accept the offer. That's coming in with kind of demanding language, where if you're doing this as asking a question, you could position it with language like this. Thanks so much for this offer. I'm super excited about the opportunity. I've been doing a lot of research and thinking about my own financial position and my qualifications for this role. And I was wondering if there was any flexibility with the salary amount. Based on what I've seen, I really feel like 60,000 is a more fair number than 50,000. Is that something that would be possible? So you're still being firm, you're still showing that you've done your homework, but you're positioning it in a more approachable way that can lead to conversation instead of just a brick wall. And then finally, once you've negotiated, make sure that you accept or decline promptly. The last thing you want to do is have negotiated an offer. They've gone back and forth. They've tried to get you what you need. And then you say, thanks so much. I'm going to take 2 weeks now to make a decision on this. So if you have asked for a certain amount of money and they meet you there, you want to be respectful and within, a day or two, make sure that you're accepting or declining that offer.
Hey Melissa, can I ask a
Yeah.
question? Hey, just kind of a basic question, but when you negotiate with companies, and for example, you ask for a salary increase or anything, is there a chance that a company could pull out their offer? Or does that usually happen? Is that something we should consider or not really?
That's a great question. Usually they're not going to pull an offer off the table if you respectfully negotiate an offer.
Gotcha.
Very rarely have we seen that happen. The only times I've seen offers get pulled is when students are very disrespectful in the way that they're asking for more money. So as long as you're being reasonable, you're using that professional language, you're showing that enthusiasm for the role, it's a pretty low risk that they would pull the offer off the table. The same goes for asking for a deadline extension. As long as you're professional and reasonable about it. A lot of times, worst case scenario is they say no, and then you can make the decision from there. But just really keeping some of these best practices in mind, it's going to put you in a pretty safe position to be able to ask these questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
Yeah, another quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in a little bit more, or do you have a little bit more negotiating power if you're negotiating an offer like after interning with that company?
Yeah, you do, because they've already invested money in you by training you all summer. So they are definitely motivated to have you join. I would still do the research because oftentimes return interns are given more competitive offers sometimes than people going through the standard recruiting process. So before negotiating, I would just make sure that they're not already coming to you with like a really, really good offer. But you've already proven yourself there. You've shown that you're a good performer. So they are definitely more motivated to have you come back.
Awesome.
The benefit too, if you've been an intern, is you can also sometimes ask for advice from people that you worked with that summer. So if you've got good rapport with people within the company, definitely reach out to them and say like, hey, I've got my offer. There's some things that I'm uncomfortable with that I'd like to negotiate. Do you have any advice for how I should approach that? That can be a good way to get some intel on how that specific company approaches negotiation. Those are great questions. Any other questions?
I have one quick one. This might be a really dumb question, but I'm assuming that all of this conversation should be over the phone and not email. Okay.
That is not a dumb question at all, Sam. That is a fantastic question. I could not agree more with that statement that this should be done over the phone. I would add an additional piece. You can always follow up a phone call with an email. So that way you're still getting things in writing. Now, the reason we definitely recommend over the phone is because you can then control the tone of the conversation. You can show that enthusiasm. You can make sure that you're being professional in the way that you ask, and you're not leaving room for interpretation based on an email. But what I'll like to do then is after I have a conversation about negotiating, even if they're like, okay, I'm going to go back and figure out what I can do, I'll send an email afterwards that says, hi, Sam, thanks so much for our conversation. Really appreciate you looking into the things we asked for, or looking into the things I was asking about. As we discussed, it would be really helpful if there was some flexibility on salary. I'd love to be closer to 60,000. I look forward to hearing from you. I'll follow up in a few days if I haven't heard from you.
Okay.
So that way you've got that paper trail.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. What other questions do you have?
I have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
So going back to kind of what we can use to get that, whatever the salary up, is language a thing that people use to get, by being bilingual, like I would like, a 10% increase? Is that something that people would negotiate with or not necessarily?
Yeah, it's a great question. If it is relevant to the role, that is absolutely something that you can negotiate with. So if it's a global company where it would be a definite advantage to have your ability to speak multiple languages, that's absolutely something that you can bring to the table. If it's a company where it's probably not going to have a direct impact on your role starting out, it might be a little bit more difficult there. That's where things like, having internship experience, we've really seen that analytical skills, quantitative skills, coding skills, those are things that can really help bump you up in certain roles.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I want to make sure we get to tools and resources, and then we'll have plenty of additional time to answer questions as well. So there's a lot of great information out there to help you do your research. So as you're doing salary and benefits research, the two probably most common websites that people use are Glassdoor and PayScale. What I really like about PayScale is you can actually fill out a survey based on your offer and enter the exact information in for your offer. And then it will email you a report of how competitive your full offer is compared to other relevant roles. So that's a really great website. Glassdoor is probably the most popular, so it's going to have the largest data set. So that can be a really great resource to look at as well. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has some good stuff. And then I mentioned cost of living earlier. This cost of living calculator is really helpful. It can help you kind of figure out, especially if you're moving to a city that you've never lived in before, that can be a really good way to understand what that cost of living is going to look like. Your career coach, I'll say it again, I'll say it a million times, they're a fantastic resource for you. We gather data from recent grads about where they're going, and compensation is one of those things that we look at. So a lot of times, if you can tell us what company you're going to, we can do some digging and let you know how that compares to offers from previous years. So come in, talk to us at the career engagement team. I mentioned this earlier as I was answering one of the questions, but you can also talk to individuals you met throughout the interview process. I recommend not giving firm numbers about what they offered you in terms of salary, but you can definitely ask for advice or tips or their thoughts on what components of the offer might be flexible to make sure that you're approaching it the right way. You can also reach out to alumni, mentors. They're always really helpful in being able to kind of give you some tips for how to evaluate what's in front of you. And I've also included a few links to some helpful articles and blogs that have some really good tips, examples. The Vault Career Intelligence link also has some sample templates you can use as you're kind of working through this. So these are great things to keep in mind as you're getting ready to negotiate a job offer. And then finally, once you've accepted an offer, what do you do after that? One of the most important things to do is withdraw from any other recruiting processes. So you want to make sure that you're letting the other companies know that you've accepted an offer, you're going there. You really don't want to renege on an accepted offer, which means to go back and say you're not going to complete that internship or that job unless there are extenuating personal circumstances. It can be really damaging to your professional brand and can help the School of Business's relationships, can hurt the relationships we have with employers as well. So once you've accepted an offer, best practice is to withdraw from everything else. Thank the people that helped you along the way and start networking with your new colleagues. Start talking to people, let them know how excited you are. This is where networking gets to be fun and not stressful because you've got the job. And so now it's about connecting with people that you're going to be working with on a regular basis. Let us know where you're going to be working by completing the first destination survey. As I mentioned, we have data from graduates that help us coach students. This is how we get that data. So help future Badgers by letting us know where you're going so that we can use that information to better prepare other Badgers to enter companies like the ones you're going to. I'm a big fan of publicly announcing that you've accepted an offer on LinkedIn. It can be a really good way to just continue to establish your presence on LinkedIn. And it's a fun way to get some shout outs from people and stay connected with folks you met throughout the interview process. And then finally, celebrate. Accepting a job or internship is a huge accomplishment. And a lot of times we'll get students coming to us and saying like, okay, I got the job, now what do I do? What you can do right away is just celebrate and be pumped that you just got an awesome job offer. So with that, we're going to make sure that you're, keeping in mind, you want to be informed about your decision, ask for more time on an offer if you need to, make sure you're accepting the job that's best for you. Remember to leverage your network, write things down. And then the last thing I want to make sure that I let you all know about today is this thing that we call FOBO, which is fear of a better offer. This is something that, similar to FOMO, tends to creep up with students where sometimes you will have your dream job, you've got that offer in hand, but all of a sudden you get that, oh, but what if something better comes along? Really make sure that if you are holding out for another offer, it's something that you truly are excited about, not just something where you're like, I might get something better down the road. So just really keep that in mind as you're making these decisions.